The bullet grazed her shoulder as Natalie Wagner threw herself behind the overturned stagecoach, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had been traveling from El Paso to Columbus, New Mexico, carrying documents for her father's mining company when the bandits struck without warning on that cold November morning in 1884. The driver lay motionless in the dirt, and the other passengers had scattered into the foothills of the Sierra Madre range that stretched along the border. She ran, her boots slipping on loose rock as gunshots echoed behind her, and she kept running even when the sounds faded, driven by pure terror deeper into the mountains than any Easterner with 6 months in the territory had any business going. By the time the adrenaline wore off and Natalie realized she was hopelessly lost, the sky had turned the color of old pewter. She was 23 years old, had grown up in Philadelphia society, and possessed exactly zero skills for surviving in wilderness. Her navy traveling dress was torn at the hem. Her carefully pinned auburn hair had come loose and whipped around her face, and she had lost her hat somewhere during the mad scramble up the mountain. The temperature was dropping fast. She could see her breath now, little white puffs that disappeared into the gathering gloom. She tried to retrace her steps, but every rocky outcrop looked the same, every juniper and pinon tree identical to the last. Panic clawed at her throat. Her father had warned her that New Mexico territory was dangerous, that a woman alone was asking for trouble, but Natalie had insisted she could handle a simple stagecoach ride. She had wanted to prove she was more than just a decoration in her father's business dealings, that she could be useful. Now she was going to die on a mountain because of her own stubborn pride. The first snowflakes began to fall as dusk settled over the peaks. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself and kept walking, hoping she was heading downhill, toward civilization. The snow came faster, thick, wet flakes that clung to her eyelashes and melted on her cheeks. Within an hour, the world had turned white. She could barely see 10 feet ahead. Her fingers were numb inside her thin gloves, and her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue. She stumbled over a hidden root and fell hard, landing on her hands and knees in the snow. For a long moment she stayed there, breathing hard, fighting the urge to simply curl up and close her eyes, but something in her refused to surrender. She pushed herself up, wiped the snow from her face, and continued walking. The storm intensified as full darkness fell. The wind howled through the trees, driving the snow horizontal. Natalie could no longer tell which direction she was moving. She was just putting one foot in front of the other, an automaton running on fumes. Her shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed it, though the bleeding had stopped. Everything hurt. Everything was cold. She was hallucinating when she finally collapsed. She thought she saw lights, warm golden lights like windows, but that was impossible. There was nothing out here but wilderness and death. The snow was softer than she expected, almost comfortable. She closed her eyes. 30 miles away in Columbus, New Mexico, Harrison Wells was checking his gear for the 3rd time when his horse stamped impatiently. The paint gelding knew they were about to head out into nasty weather, and he was not pleased about it. Harrison did not blame him. The storm rolling in from the west looked like it meant business, the kind that could dump 2 feet of snow in the mountains and make travel impossible for days. "I know, Cisco," Harrison said, patting the horse's neck. "I do not like it either, but we have got a job to do." He was a tracker by trade, hired by ranchers to find lost cattle, by sheriffs to track outlaws, by desperate families to locate missing persons. He was 28 years old, had been born in Texas and raised in every rough town between there and California, and could read sign like other men read newspapers. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that missed nothing. His face was weathered beyond his years from life in the sun and wind, but there was a gentleness in his expression that put people at ease. Despite the worn colt at his hip, the sheriff had hired him an hour ago, right after the report came in about the stagecoach robbery. There were 4 passengers unaccounted for, scattered in the mountains. Search parties had found 2 of them by late afternoon, both alive. A third had been found dead, an older man who had taken a bullet to the chest. But there was still one missing, a young woman, a Miss Natalie Wagner from back east. The other survivors said she had run into the foothills during the attack, and no one had seen her since. Most of the volunteers had turned back when the snow started. They said it was suicide to go up there in a blizzard, that the woman was probably already dead anyway. Harrison understood their reasoning. He did not agree with it. As long as there was a chance someone was alive and needed help, he would look. That was just how he was built. He swung into the saddle and turned Cisco toward the mountains. The snow was already accumulating in the streets of Columbus, and the wind cut through his heavy coat like it was made of paper. He had packed supplies for 3 days, though he hoped it would not take that long. He had a bedroll, food, extra ammunition, matches wrapped in oilcloth, and a flask of whiskey for medicinal purposes. He also had his tracking skills, which were considerable, and his stubbornness, which was even more so. The ride to the robbery site took 2 hours in the worsening conditions. By the time he arrived, the overturned stagecoach was half buried in snow. The driver's body had been taken away, and the scene was deserted except for the wind and the darkness. Harrison dismounted and lit a lantern, holding it low to the ground as he searched for tracks. The snow was making it difficult, covering everything with a blank white shroud, but he was patient and methodical. There. A partial print, nearly filled in but still visible in the shelter of a rock. A woman's boot, small, heading uphill at a run. He found another print 20 feet away, then another. She had been moving fast, panicked. He followed the trail as far as he could before the snow obliterated it completely. But he had a direction now, and that was something. He climbed, leading Cisco by the reins, stopping every few minutes to search for more sign. A broken branch here, a scuff mark on a stone there. The woman had no tracking skills whatsoever, had left a trail a child could follow, but the storm was erasing it as fast as Harrison could find it. He moved faster, knowing that time was running out for her. If she was not already dead from exposure, she soon would be. The hours blurred together. The world became nothing but snow and darkness and the small circle of light from his lantern. Harrison's face was numb, his fingers stiff inside his gloves. Cisco plodded behind him with the patience of a horse who trusted his rider absolutely. They climbed higher into the mountains, following a trail that grew fainter with each passing minute. Harrison almost missed the footprint that saved her life. It was pure luck that his lantern swung at just the right angle to catch the depression in the snow beside a fallen log. He knelt, brushing away the fresh powder with his gloved hand. There, a clear print, no more than an hour old. She had stopped here, rested maybe. He looked around, trying to think like a terrified woman with no wilderness experience. Where would she go from here? Downhill. She would try to go downhill back toward the flats. He turned and began moving in a new direction, quartering back and forth across the slope, searching. The snow was getting deeper, past his knees in places. Cisco struggled through it, snorting in displeasure. Then he saw it. A dark shape in the snow, partially covered already. Harrison's heart kicked hard. He ran, stumbling through the drifts, and dropped to his knees beside her. The woman was curled on her side, her face pale as death, her lips blue. He pulled off his glove and pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. For a terrible moment, he felt nothing. Then, faint but present, a flutter beneath his fingertips. Thank God, he breathed. She was alive, but barely. He had to get her warm and dry fast, or she would not stay alive for long. He looked around, assessing their situation. They could not make it back to Columbus in these conditions, not with the woman unconscious and hypothermic. They needed shelter immediately. He thought of the area, trying to remember if there was anything nearby. Then it came to him. There was a line shack about half a mile west, an old shelter used by cowboys during roundup. It was not much, but it would get them out of the wind. Harrison gathered the woman into his arms, surprised by how light she was. He managed to get her draped across Cisco's saddle, then hauled himself up behind her, holding her secure against his chest. He turned the horse west and gave him his head, trusting the animal's instincts to find the way. The ride seemed to take forever. Harrison hunched over the woman, trying to shield her from the wind with his body. He talked to her even though she could not hear him. A steady stream of words meant to keep himself focused as much as her alive. "Stay with me now. We are almost there. You are going to be fine. Just hold on." When the dark bulk of the line shack finally appeared through the snow, Harrison nearly wept with relief. He dismounted and carried the woman inside, kicking the door open with his boot. The interior was pitch black and smelled of old wood and mouse droppings, but it was dry and the walls blocked the wind. He laid her on the floor as gently as he could, then went back out for his saddlebags and bedroll. Cisco could not fit inside, so Harrison led him around to the lee side of the shack where the walls would provide some shelter from the wind, then stripped off the saddle and rubbed him down as quickly as possible with an old grain sack from the shack. It was not ideal, but it was the best he could do under the circumstances. "Sorry, old friend," he said. "I will make it up to you, I promise." Back inside, Harrison shut the door against the storm and turned his attention to the woman. He fumbled with cold, stiffened fingers to light a candle stub he found on a shelf, then lit the kindling he had laid in the small stone fireplace. The wood caught, and blessed warmth began to fill the tiny space. In the flickering light, he got his first good look at his patient. She was beautiful, though that was not what struck him first. What struck him was how young she looked, and how fragile. Her skin was waxen, her breathing so shallow he had to watch carefully to see her chest rise and fall. She was still wearing her wet, snow-covered dress, which was the first problem he needed to address. Wet clothing would kill her as surely as a bullet. Harrison hesitated. He was acutely aware that this woman was a stranger, a lady from back east, and that undressing her was a massive violation of propriety. But propriety be damned. He was not about to let her die for the sake of her modesty. He worked quickly and clinically, peeling off her wet dress, petticoats, and stockings, trying not to think about anything except keeping her alive. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and he swore under his breath. He wrapped her in his bedroll and both of their coats, then positioned her as close to the fire as he dared. He chafed her hands and feet, trying to restore circulation. Frostbite was a real concern. Her fingers were white at the tips, but not blackened, which was a good sign. He rubbed them gently but firmly, willing warmth back into them. She did not wake, which worried him. Hypothermia could scramble a person's brain, make them confused and disoriented. Or it could just kill them. Harrison heated water from his canteen over the fire and tried to get some of the warm liquid between her lips. Most of it dribbled down her chin, but some went down her throat. And that was something. He worked on her for what felt like hours, rubbing her limbs, adjusting the blankets, feeding the fire. Gradually, her skin began to lose that deathly pallor. Color crept back into her cheeks. Her breathing deepened. Harrison sagged back against the wall, exhausted with relief. The storm raged outside, shaking the walls of the shack. Snow seeped through cracks in the walls, and the wind screamed like something alive. But inside their small shelter it was almost cozy, the fire crackling cheerfully, the worst of the cold driven back. Harrison allowed himself a small smile. They had made it. They were alive. Everything else could wait until morning. He must have dozed because the next thing he knew, someone was screaming. He jerked awake to find the woman sitting up, clutching the blankets to her chest, her eyes wild with terror. She was staring at him like he was a monster. "Easy," Harrison said, holding up his hands. "You are safe. I am not going to hurt you." "Who are you? Where am I? Where are my clothes?" Her voice was hoarse, panicked. She looked around the tiny shack wildly, taking in the rough walls, the dirt floor, the single window caked with snow. "My name is Harrison Wells. I am a tracker. The sheriff hired me to find you after the stagecoach robbery. You were lost in the mountains when the storm hit, and I tracked your prints through the snow. You were unconscious when I found you, nearly frozen to death. I had to get you out of your wet clothes or you would have died. Your dress is hanging by the fire, drying. I did not do anything improper. I swear it." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her mind working, processing his words, deciding whether to believe him. Finally, some of the panic left her eyes. "The stagecoach. The bandits. I remember. I ran. I kept running." Her voice broke. "The driver. Is he dead? I am sorry." She closed her eyes, swaying. Harrison moved closer, ready to catch her if she fainted, but she steadied herself. "The other passengers?" "2 found alive, 1 man dead. You were the last one missing." She nodded, taking that in. Then she seemed to realize she was wearing nothing but a blanket, and her cheeks flushed red. "Could you turn around, please?" Harrison turned to face the wall, giving her privacy. He heard rustling as she checked her dress, which was still damp but no longer soaking wet. "It is not dry yet," he said. "You should wait. You can wear my spare shirt if you want. It is in my saddlebag." More rustling then. "All right, you can turn around." She had wrapped herself mummy-style in the blankets so that only her face showed. Her hair was a wild tangle of auburn waves around her shoulders. In the firelight, her eyes were a startling shade of green, and Harrison felt something shift in his chest. He told himself it was just relief that she was alive, nothing more. He handed her his extra shirt without comment, then turned around again while she put it on under the blankets. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life. I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did. Another hour and—" He did not finish the sentence. They both knew how it would have ended. "I am Natalie Wagner." "Harrison Wells, but I told you that already." He felt awkward suddenly, unsure what to say to this woman he had undressed and wrapped in blankets. Under any other circumstances, this situation would be scandalous beyond measure. Out here, it was just survival. "How long have I been unconscious?" "Few hours, maybe. It is hard to tell. The storm is still going strong outside." As if to punctuate his words, a gust of wind rattled the shack's walls. Natalie pulled the blankets tighter around herself. "How long will we be stuck here?" "Until the storm passes. Could be a few hours, could be a few days. No way to know." She absorbed this in silence. Harrison busied himself checking their supplies, taking inventory. He had enough food for both of them for maybe 2 days if they were careful. Water was not a problem since they could melt snow. Firewood was limited to what was stacked in the corner of the shack, but it would do. They would be uncomfortable, but they would survive. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Starving, actually." He broke out some jerky and hardtack, apologizing for the meager fare. Natalie ate without complaint, and Harrison found himself impressed. Most Eastern women of his acquaintance would have been having hysterics by now. She was scared, he could see it in her eyes, but she was holding herself together. They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling of the wind. Harrison found himself sneaking glances at her when he thought she was not looking. Even wrapped in blankets with her hair a mess and no shoes on, she was lovely. There was something about her that drew the eye, a vibrancy that not even near death could dim. "What were you doing on that stagecoach?" he asked, mostly to break the silence. "Carrying documents for my father's mining company. He has interests in Columbus and the surrounding area. I work for him, handle correspondence and contracts." She said it with a note of defiance, as if expecting him to question why a woman would do such work. Harrison just nodded. "Dangerous route, especially alone." "I was not alone. There were other passengers and a driver." Her voice caught on the last word, and Harrison mentally kicked himself for bringing up the dead man. "I am sorry. That was thoughtless of me." "It is not your fault. None of this is your fault. You saved my life." She looked at him directly, and he was struck again by those green eyes. "I cannot ever repay that." "No repayment necessary. It is what I do." "Still, I owe you everything." The intensity in her voice made Harrison uncomfortable. He stood and checked the fire, adding another log even though it did not really need it, just to have something to do with his hands. When he turned back, Natalie was watching him with an expression he could not read. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "If we are going to be stuck here for a while, we might as well get to know each other." So Harrison told her. Not everything, but enough. About growing up wild in Texas, about learning to track from a Lipan Apache scout who had worked for his father, about striking out on his own at 16 and making his way across the West doing whatever work he could find. He told her about the good people he had met and the bad ones, about narrow escapes and hard lessons learned. He found himself talking more than he usually did, drawn out by her genuine interest and the strange intimacy of their situation. In turn, Natalie told him about Philadelphia, about her life as the daughter of a wealthy businessman, about her education at a finishing school where she learned French and piano and how to pour tea. She told him about her frustration with the limited roles available to women, about her determination to be useful in her father's business, about the thrill she had felt when he finally agreed to let her handle some of his Western interests. "I wanted adventure," she said with a rueful smile. "I certainly got it." "Be careful what you wish for," Harrison replied. But he was smiling too. They talked late into the night until the fire burned low and exhaustion finally caught up with them both. Harrison insisted Natalie take the bedroll, and he made do with his coat and saddle blanket. It was not comfortable, but he had slept in worse places. He woke several times during the night to feed the fire and check on her. Each time she was sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and even. Each time he felt that strange tightness in his chest when he looked at her. He told himself it was just concern for someone in his care. He told himself a lot of things. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the wind was worse, and snow was piled halfway up the door. Harrison had to put his shoulder to it to force it open enough to squeeze outside. The world was an endless expanse of white, the mountains invisible through the blowing snow. Cisco was still standing in the lee of the shack, covered in a thick layer of snow, but otherwise all right. Harrison brushed him off and gave him some grain from his saddlebag, then trudged through the drifts to gather more wood from a fallen tree he remembered seeing nearby. By the time he got back inside, he was covered head to toe in snow and shaking with cold. Natalie was awake, sitting by the fire with the blankets wrapped around her. Her dress was finally dry, but she had kept on his shirt underneath it for extra warmth. She looked up as he entered, concern on her face. "You are freezing. Come sit by the fire." He did gratefully, stripping off his wet coat and gloves. She poured him coffee from the pot he had set on the fire earlier, and he wrapped his hands around the tin cup, savoring the warmth. They sat in companionable silence, drinking coffee and listening to the storm rage outside. "Another day of this at least," Harrison said. "Maybe more." Natalie nodded. She did not look upset, just resigned. "Well, at least we have shelter and fire and company. It could be worse." It could definitely be worse. They passed the day talking, playing cards with a worn deck Harrison found in his saddlebag, telling stories. Harrison taught Natalie how to tie various knots used in ranching and camping. She taught him a few phrases in French, laughing at his terrible pronunciation. The hours slipped by more quickly than he would have thought possible. It was strange, Harrison reflected, how comfortable he felt with her. He was not much for talking usually, preferred his own company or that of his horse to most people. But Natalie was different. She was easy to talk to, quick-witted and funny, genuinely interested in his answers when she asked him questions. And she was beautiful, though he tried not to think about that too much. She was a lady from back east, daughter of a wealthy businessman way out of his league. Once they got back to civilization, she would return to her world, and he would return to his, and that would be that. But knowing that did not stop him from noticing the way the firelight caught in her hair, turning it copper and gold. Did not stop him from watching the way her hands moved when she talked, graceful and expressive. Did not stop his breath from catching when she smiled at something he said. Natalie was having similar thoughts, though she tried to hide it better. She had never met anyone like Harrison Wells. The men in her social circle were soft, pampered, more concerned with their cravats than anything of substance. Harrison was different. He was capable and strong, but also gentle and kind. He had risked his life to find her in the storm, had saved her life with no thought of reward or recognition, and when he looked at her with those gray eyes, she felt something stir inside her that she had never felt before. She told herself it was just gratitude, the natural attachment a person might feel towards someone who had saved them. She told herself it was the strange intimacy of their situation, trapped together in a tiny shack with nothing to do but talk. She told herself it would pass once they returned to the real world. She told herself a lot of things that she did not quite believe. The second night was harder than the first. The novelty of the situation had worn off, and the reality of their circumstances set in. The shack was freezing despite the fire. Their food was running low. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Natalie tried to stay positive, but Harrison could see the worry in her eyes. "We will be fine," he assured her. "The storm has to break eventually, and when it does, we'll make our way back to Columbus. You will be back with your father before you know it." "My father must be frantic with worry." "I am sure he is, but he hired me to find you, which shows good sense. He will trust that I will bring you back safe." "And you will you not?" There was something vulnerable in her voice, a need for reassurance that made Harrison's chest ache. "I will. I promise." She smiled at him, and the warmth in her expression had nothing to do with the fire. "I believe you." That night, as they settled down to sleep, the temperature dropped so low that Harrison could see his breath even inside the shack. The fire was roaring, but it was not enough. Natalie was shivering despite being wrapped in every blanket they had. Harrison hesitated, torn between propriety and practicality. Finally, practicality won out. "You need more warmth," he said. "Body heat. If we share the blankets, we will both be warmer." She looked at him for a long moment, and he braced himself for a refusal, for accusations of impropriety. Instead, she just nodded. "All right, that makes sense." They arranged themselves awkwardly at first, both hyper-aware of the other's proximity, but gradually they relaxed, drawn together by the cold and the need for warmth. Harrison found himself with Natalie's back pressed against his chest, his arms around her, both of them cocooned in blankets. She fit against him perfectly, like she was made to be there. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." They lay there in the darkness, listening to the wind, and Harrison tried not to think about how right this felt, how much he wanted to keep holding her like this even after the storm ended. He tried not to think about the way his heart was hammering, the way his entire being seemed focused on the warm woman in his arms. He failed miserably. Natalie was having similar trouble. She could feel every breath Harrison took, could feel the solid strength of him at her back, the gentle way he held her. She felt safe for the first time since the stagecoach robbery, truly safe. More than that, she felt something else, something that made her pulse race and her cheeks flush in the darkness. She was falling for him. It was insane, impossible, ridiculous. She had known him for less than 2 days, but her heart did not care about logic or proper courtship or social expectations. Her heart only knew that this man had saved her life, had been unfailingly kind and respectful, and made her feel more alive than anyone she had ever met. "Harrison," she whispered into the darkness. "Yes?" "I am glad it was you. Who found me, I mean. I cannot imagine anyone else I would rather be stranded with." There was a long pause. Then, so softly she almost did not hear it, "I am glad, too." Something passed between them in that moment, unspoken but real. Natalie felt it in the way his arms tightened around her just a little, in the sudden tension in his body. She turned in his arms so she was facing him, though she could barely see his features in the darkness. But she could feel his breath on her face, could sense how close he was. "This is probably a terrible idea," she breathed. Probably, he agreed. And then somehow they were kissing, tentative at first, then with growing intensity. Harrison cupped her face in his hands like she was something precious, and Natalie felt like she was falling, spinning, flying. His lips were warm and gentle and demanding all at once, and she responded with an urgency that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have done that. You are a lady, and I am just a tracker, and this is taking advantage of the situation." "Stop," Natalie said firmly. She took his face in her hands. "You did not take advantage of anything. I wanted you to kiss me. I have been wanting you to kiss me since I woke up and saw you watching over me. Natalie, I know this is fast. I know it is crazy. I know all the reasons why this does not make sense. But right now, in this moment, I do not care about any of that. I only care that you are here, and I am here, and I feel something for you that I have never felt for anyone." Harrison looked at her for a long moment, and she could see the war playing out in his expression, desire fighting with honor. Finally, he said, "I feel it too. From the moment I found you in the snow, something changed in me. I have spent my whole life alone, never wanting or needing anyone. And then there you were, and suddenly I wanted everything." "Then take it," Natalie said simply. "Take everything. I am offering it freely." They made love that night in the tiny line shack while the storm raged outside, slow and tender and achingly sweet. Harrison was careful with her, reverent, treating her like something infinitely precious. Natalie had never experienced anything like it, had never imagined that physical intimacy could be so consuming, so profound. They moved together like they had been made for each other, and when it was over, they lay tangled together under the blankets, both stunned by the depth of what had just passed between them. "What happens now?" Natalie asked, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "Now we survive. We get through this storm, we get back to town, and we figure out the rest as we go. My father will not approve. You know that, right? He will want me to marry someone from our social circle, someone with money and connections. I know. I do not care what he wants. I am not going to give you up." Harrison tightened his arms around her. "Let us get through the next few days first, then we will worry about your father and society and everything else." The storm finally broke on the third morning. Harrison woke to silence, the absence of wind so profound it was almost shocking. He disentangled himself carefully from Natalie and went to the door, forcing it open. The world outside was transformed, buried under feet of pristine white snow. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the sun reflecting off the snow was almost blinding. "It is over," he called back to Natalie. "The storm is over." They prepared to leave quickly, both eager to get back to civilization despite their newfound closeness. Harrison saddled Cisco, who seemed equally eager to get moving after 3 days of standing in the cold. They packed up their meager belongings, scattered the fire, and set out down the mountain. The journey was slow going. The snow was deep, and Cisco had to plunge through drifts in some places. Harrison walked alongside, leading the horse, while Natalie rode. Several times they had to detour around impassable areas where the snow had drifted too deep, but they made steady progress, and by early afternoon they could see Columbus spread out below them in the valley. As they descended, the reality of their situation began to sink in. In the line shack, they had been in their own private world, separate from the rules and expectations of society. But now they were returning to that world, and they would have to face the consequences of what had happened between them. "Are you having regrets?" Harrison asked at one point, watching her face carefully. "No," Natalie said firmly. "Not even one. Are you?" "No, but I am worried about what happens next. Your father is not going to be happy about this." "Let me worry about my father. He will come around eventually. He always does." Harrison was not so sure, but he did not argue. They would find out soon enough. Their arrival in Columbus caused quite a stir. People came running when they saw them approaching, shouting questions, spreading the word that the missing woman had been found. The sheriff met them in the street, relief written all over his weathered face. "Thank God, Wells, we thought you were both dead. When the storm did not let up, and you did not come back." He helped Natalie down from the horse, looking her over with concern. "Are you all right, Miss Wagner? Are you hurt?" "I am fine, Sheriff. Thanks to Mr. Wells. He saved my life." "I do not doubt it. Your father is at the hotel near out of his mind with worry. You should go to him right away." Natalie looked at Harrison, and he saw the reluctance in her eyes, the unwillingness to leave him even for a moment. But duty called. She nodded. "I will go to him. But Harrison, will you wait for me, please? We need to talk." "I will wait," he promised. She smiled, then turned and hurried toward the hotel. Harrison watched her go, fighting the urge to follow. The sheriff was watching him with a knowing expression. "Want to tell me what happened up there, Wells?" "We survived. That is what happened." "That all?" Harrison met his gaze steadily. "That is between me and Miss Wagner." The sheriff nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Wells. But that woman is the daughter of one of the richest men in the territory. Her father is not going to take kindly to his little girl spending 3 days alone in a cabin with a tracker, no matter how innocent it was." "It was not innocent," Harrison said quietly, "and I am not going to lie about it or hide from it. What happened between us is real, and I am not ashamed of it." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Well, that is going to make things interesting." He clapped Harrison on the shoulder. "Good luck, son. You are going to need it." Harrison took care of Cisco first, getting him settled in the livery with extra grain and a good rub-down. The horse had earned it. Then he went to the boarding house where he kept a room when he was in town, cleaned himself up, and changed into his spare clothes. He tried not to think about what was happening at the hotel, about the conversation between Natalie and her father. He told himself it would be fine. He did not quite believe it. An hour later, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find a well-dressed man in his 50s with graying hair and cold blue eyes. He did not need an introduction to know this was Richard Wagner, Natalie's father. "Mr. Wells, I am Richard Wagner. I believe you have met my daughter." "Yes, sir. Please, come in." Wagner entered the small room, looking around with barely concealed distaste at the rough furnishings. Harrison stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. Wagner might have money and power, but Harrison had something more important: Natalie's heart. "I came to thank you for saving my daughter's life," Wagner said formally, "and to pay you for your services. Name your price." "I do not want your money, Mr. Wagner." "Everyone wants money, Mr. Wells. Do not insult me by pretending otherwise." "I am not pretending. The sheriff hired me to find your daughter, and he already paid me. I do not need more than that." Wagner studied him with those cold eyes. "Natalie told me what happened. Between the two of you, in that cabin." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Did she?" "She did. She also told me that she has feelings for you and that she intends to pursue a relationship with you regardless of my approval." Wagner's voice was hard. "I am here to tell you that I will not allow that to happen." "With respect, sir, that is not your decision to make. Natalie is a grown woman. She can make her own choices." "She is my daughter, and she is young and naive and clearly confused about what happened up there. You took advantage of her in a vulnerable moment, and I will not stand for it." Harrison felt anger flare hot in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "I did not take advantage of anyone. What happened between us was mutual and real. I love your daughter, Mr. Wagner, and she loves me." "Love!" Wagner said it like it was a dirty word. "You have known her for 3 days. That is not love. That is infatuation at best, trauma bonding at worst. It will pass, and when it does, Natalie will realize what a mistake she nearly made." "I do not think so." "I am offering you $5,000 to leave Columbus and never contact my daughter again. That is more money than you will make in 5 years of tracking. Take it and go, and everyone will be better off." "No. 10,000. That is my final offer." You could offer me $1 million and my answer would still be no. I'm not leaving unless Natalie tells me to leave, and even then I would probably fight for her. Wagner's face turned red with anger. You arrogant son of a bitch! Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? I can destroy you. I can make sure you never work in this territory again. I can make your life a living hell. You can try, Harrison said quietly. But I have been through hell already, Mr. Wagner, and I am still standing. I am not afraid of you. They stood there glaring at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Wagner said, My daughter deserves better than a half-educated drifter who lives out of saddlebags and makes his living crawling through the dirt. She deserves someone who can give her the life she is accustomed to, someone who can provide for her properly. Maybe. But I am the one she wants. And I am the one who will love her every day for the rest of my life, who will protect her and cherish her and never take her for granted. Can you say the same about whatever society gentleman you have picked out for her? Wagner had no answer to that. He stood there for a long moment, then turned on his heel and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. This is not over, Wells. Not by a long shot. Then he was gone. Harrison sagged against the wall, his hands shaking slightly. That had gone about as badly as he had expected. He knew Wagner would not give up easily, that there would be more pressure, more threats. But he had meant what he said. He was not giving up Natalie without a fight. There was another knock on the door an hour later. This time it was Natalie herself, looking furious and beautiful. She swept into the room and threw her arms around him, holding him tight. My father is an absolute bastard, she said into his chest. He told me about his visit, about offering you money to leave. I cannot believe him. He is just trying to protect you, in his own terrible way. He's trying to control me. There is a difference. She pulled back to look up at him. Harrison, I am not going to let him bully us. I am not going to let him ruin this. Natalie, maybe you should think about this. Really think about it. Your father is right about some things. I cannot give you the life you are used to. I am a tracker. I make decent money, but I'm not wealthy. I do not have a big house or servants or any of the things you grew up with. If you stay with me, you are giving up a lot. I am not giving up anything that matters, she said fiercely. Things do not matter. Houses and money and social standing, none of that matters. You matter. What we have matters. I would rather live in a one-room cabin with you than in a mansion with someone I do not love. You say that now, but what about in a year? 2 years? What if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake, that you gave up too much? That is not going to happen, Harrison. I have spent my whole life in that world, and I have been miserable. I have been trying to find something real, something meaningful, and then I found you. You are what I have been searching for. Do not push me away because you think you are not good enough. You are more than good enough. You are everything. Harrison looked at her, at the determination and love shining in those green eyes, and felt something settle in his chest. She was right. They were right. Whatever obstacles they faced, they would face them together. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and she responded with equal fervor. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, "Marry me." Natalie's eyes widened. What? Marry me right now, today, before your father can interfere or cause problems. We will find a preacher, get married, and then what is done is done. He will have to accept it. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely, yes. They found a circuit preacher in the local church, a kind-faced older man who agreed to marry them immediately despite the unusual circumstances. The sheriff and his wife stood as witnesses, both of them beaming. The ceremony was simple and quick, no flowers or music or fancy dress, but Natalie had never been happier in her life. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her like she was air, and he had been drowning, and she kissed him back with everything she had. They emerged from the church as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Word had already spread about the wedding. and there was a small crowd waiting to congratulate them. Harrison kept Natalie's hand clasped firmly in his, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. Richard Wagner was waiting at the hotel when they returned. His face was thunderous, but there was also something else in his expression, something that might have been grudging respect. "So you went and did it," he said flatly. "You got married without even giving me a chance to talk you out of it." "Yes," Natalie said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I married Harrison, and I'm not sorry. I love him, Father. And whether you approve or not, he is my husband now." Wagner looked between them for a long moment. Then he sighed, and suddenly he looked older, tired. "Your mother would have liked him," he said quietly. "She always said I cared too much about money and not enough about character. She would have said you chose well." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. Her mother had died 5 years ago, and she missed her every day. "You mean that?" "I do not like it. I think you're both fools for rushing into this, but I can see that you love each other, and I suppose that counts for something." He looked at Harrison. "You hurt her, and I will destroy you. But if you make her happy, if you treat her right, then I suppose we can find a way to get along." "I will make her happy," Harrison promised. "That is all I want to do." Wagner nodded stiffly, then surprised them both by pulling Natalie into a hug. "Be happy, little one," he said gruffly. "That is all I ever wanted for you." After he left, Natalie and Harrison stood in the hotel hallway holding each other. It felt surreal, everything that had happened. 4 days ago, Natalie had been on a stagecoach, alone and bored. Now she was married to a man she loved with all her heart, embarking on a new life she had never imagined. "What now?" she asked, echoing her question from the line shack. "Now we figure out where we are going to live. I have my room at the boarding house, but it is pretty small for 2 people. We will need to find something bigger. I have money from my father's business. We can buy a house or build one." "I want to pay my own way," Harrison said. "I do not want to live off your father's money." "It is not his money, it is mine. I earned it working for him, and it is our money now together. There is no shame in using it to build a good life." Harrison hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but I am still working. I am still tracking. That is who I am." "I would not want you to be anyone else," Natalie said, and kissed him. They found a small house on the edge of Columbus, nothing fancy but solid and well-built with 2 bedrooms and a good stove. Harrison used his savings for the down payment, stubborn about contributing despite Natalie's protests. They moved in a week after the wedding, and Natalie threw herself into making it a home. She discovered she loved being a homemaker in a way she had never enjoyed her role in Philadelphia society. There was something deeply satisfying about cooking meals for Harrison, about mending his clothes and keeping the house clean. It felt real and meaningful in a way tea parties and social calls never had. Harrison continued his work as a tracker, but he turned down jobs that would take him away for more than a few days. He could not stand to be apart from Natalie, found himself hurrying home every evening, eager to see her, to hold her, to talk about their days. He had never been so content, so happy. They were not without challenges. Some of the townspeople looked down on Natalie for marrying beneath her station, whispered about how she had thrown away her future. Natalie ignored them with a grace that made Harrison fall even more in love with her. She made friends among the working families of Columbus, the ranchers' wives and shopkeepers' daughters, and found she had more in common with them than she ever had with the society ladies of Philadelphia. Richard Wagner visited occasionally, gruff and uncomfortable, but making an effort. He offered Harrison work tracking down claim jumpers at his mining operations, and Harrison accepted, glad to have a way to build a bridge with his father-in-law. Slowly, grudgingly, they developed a mutual respect. 6 months after the wedding, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She told Harrison over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, joy, terror. Then he swept her up into his arms and spun her around, laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said, sounding awed. You and me, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Natalie asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful and about 100 other things all at once, but mostly I'm just so damned happy I could burst." Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1885, after a labor that lasted 14 hours and left Harrison a nervous wreck pacing outside the bedroom while the midwife attended to Natalie. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst through the door despite the midwife's protests. Natalie was propped up in bed, exhausted and beautiful, holding a tiny red-faced bundle. She looked up at Harrison with so much love in her eyes it made his chest tight. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Harrison approached like he was walking on holy ground. He looked down at the baby, at the tiny, perfect features, the shock of dark hair, the miniature hands curled into fists. Something shifted in him, something fundamental and profound. This was his child, his son. He would protect him and love him and teach him and raise him right. "He is perfect," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect. I cannot believe you are both mine." They named him Henry, and he was the light of their lives. Harrison discovered he loved being a father almost as much as he loved being Natalie's husband. He would spend hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at every tiny movement. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved toys, sang off-key lullabies that made Natalie laugh. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the Wells family settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison still took tracking jobs but arranged his schedule around his family. Natalie started a small business making and selling her own herbal remedies, having learned the craft from an old Mexican woman in town. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. Richard Wagner became a doting grandfather, showing up every few weeks with expensive gifts that made Harrison roll his eyes and Natalie laugh. He taught Henry to ride when the boy was barely 3, over Natalie's protests. But watching her stern father turn soft and playful with her son was a gift Natalie had never expected. 2 years after Henry was born, Natalie had a daughter. They named her Rose, and she had her mother's auburn hair and green eyes. She was a terror from the moment she could crawl, getting into everything, fearless and stubborn. Harrison adored her. He would let her climb all over him, tug his hair, stick her chubby fingers in his mouth, completely helpless against her charms. "You are a disaster with her," Natalie teased one evening, watching Harrison let Rose smear mashed carrots all over his face. "She is going to be completely spoiled." "That is your fault for being so beautiful," Harrison replied. "She gets it from you, and I cannot resist either of you." Life was good. Life was very good. Harrison tracked bounties and missing cattle and the occasional lost person, building a reputation as one of the best in the territory. Natalie's herbal remedy business grew, and she started supplying several shops in surrounding towns. They expanded their house, adding another bedroom and a workroom for Natalie. They were building something real, something that would last. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Natalie back to the line shack where they had fallen in love. They left the children with Richard for the weekend, much to his delight, and rode up into the mountains. It was summer now. The mountains green and lush, nothing like that terrible winter storm. The shack was still there, though it looked even more ramshackle in the daylight. They went inside, and Natalie looked around with wonder. It seemed so much smaller than she remembered. Hard to believe they had spent 3 days in this tiny space. "This is where it all started," she said softly. "Where I fell in love with you." "Best storm I ever lived through," Harrison said, pulling her close. "Changed my whole life." "Mine too." She looked up at him. "Do you ever regret it? Walking away from your old life, taking on a wife and family? I know you liked your freedom." "Not for a single second. You and the kids. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was just existing, drifting from one job to the next. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something. You gave me a home." He kissed her gently. "I love you, Natalie Wells, more now than the day we got married, and that is saying something." I love you too, so much. She kissed him back deeper, and they made love in that old shack just like they had 5 years ago, though with considerably more skill and much better blankets. Afterward, lying tangled together on the floor, Natalie said, I want more children, at least 2 more. Harrison laughed. Well, we had better get started on that then. We just did. Practice makes perfect. They had 2 more children over the next 4 years, another son named James and a daughter named Lucy. The house was chaotic and loud and full of love. Harrison taught all the children to ride and track, passing on the skills that had saved Natalie's life all those years ago. Natalie taught them to read and write and figure, determined that all her children, including the girls, would have good educations. Henry grew into a serious, responsible boy who idolized his father. Rose was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or racing her pony despite Natalie's concerns. James was quiet and thoughtful, happiest with a book. Lucy was still a baby, but she already showed signs of being a perfect combination of her siblings' various traits. Richard Wagner mellowed as he aged, spending more and more time in Columbus with his grandchildren. He and Harrison developed a real friendship, bonded by their love for Natalie and the kids. When Richard died peacefully in his sleep at 70, Harrison grieved alongside his wife, having lost a father figure he had never expected to gain. The years rolled on. The children grew up, fell in love, married, had children of their own. Henry became a rancher, married a sweet-faced girl from a neighboring spread. Rose scandalized everyone by becoming a Pinkerton detective, but she was brilliant at it. James became a teacher, married one of his fellow educators. Lucy married a cavalry officer and followed him from post to post, writing long letters home about her adventures. Harrison and Natalie grew old together in their house on the edge of Columbus. Harrison's hair turned silver, and his hands grew knotted with arthritis, but his eyes were still sharp, and he could still track better than men half his age. Natalie's auburn hair faded to white, and lines creased her face, but she was still beautiful to Harrison, still the woman he had fallen in love with in a snowstorm. They sat on their porch on summer evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, surrounded by grandchildren who climbed on them and demanded stories. Harrison would tell them about tracking outlaws and finding lost cattle, and Natalie would tell them about Philadelphia and learning to make herbal remedies. But their favorite story was always the same, the story of how their grandparents met during a terrible blizzard, how a cowboy tracked a lost woman through the snow and saved her life, how they fell in love in a tiny line shack while the storm raged outside. That is the most romantic story ever. Their eldest granddaughter sighed every time she heard it. It is the truest story ever, Harrison always replied. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. Your grandmother was lost in a blizzard, and I found her, and we built this whole beautiful life together, all because of a storm. All because of a brave cowboy who did not give up, Natalie would add, squeezing his hand. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The celebration was held at Henry's ranch, with tables laden with food and musicians playing and dancing that lasted until dawn. Harrison and Natalie danced together under the stars, moving slowly to a sweet waltz, still as in love as they had been 50 years ago in that line shack. Thank you, Natalie whispered, her head on his shoulder. For what? For finding me, for saving me, for loving me all these years. Thank you for being worth finding, Harrison replied. For being worth saving. For making my life so much more than I ever dreamed it could be. Harrison Wells died peacefully at 82 in his sleep, with Natalie beside him. She followed him 6 months later, unable to live without the other half of her soul. They were buried side by side in the Columbus Cemetery, their headstones simple but perfect. Harrison and Natalie Wells together forever. Their love story became legend in Columbus, passed down through generations. The line shack in the mountains became a sort of pilgrimage site for romantic couples, though it eventually fell to ruins. But the story lived on. The tale of a woman lost in a blizzard and the cowboy who tracked her through the snow, who found her when she was dying and brought her back to life, who fell in love with her in 3 days and loved her for 50 years. It was the kind of love people wrote songs and poems about, the kind that inspired others to believe in the possibility of finding their own perfect match. It was proof that sometimes the worst moments could lead to the best outcomes, that tragedy could transform into triumph, that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions. In the end, that is what their story was really about, not just survival, but the miracle of two souls finding each other against impossible odds and choosing to build a life together. It was about love conquering all the obstacles society and circumstance threw in its path. It was about a cowboy and a society lady who should never have worked but somehow did, perfectly and completely. Their great-grandchildren still live in and around Columbus, carrying on the Wells name and legacy. They tell the story to their own children, keeping the memory alive. And sometimes, on winter nights when the snow falls heavy in the mountains, people swear they can see two figures riding together through the storm, a cowboy and his lady, forever tracking each other through the snow, forever finding each other, forever in love. The house where Harrison and Natalie raised their family still stands, lovingly maintained by their descendants. The rooms that once echoed with children's laughter now hold great-great-grandchildren who play on the same floors, who sleep in bedrooms that have sheltered 6 generations of Wells family members. Natalie's workroom, where she made her herbal remedies, has been preserved exactly as she left it, a shrine to her memory and her independence. In the town of Columbus, there is a historical marker near the spot where the stagecoach was robbed all those years ago, commemorating the events that led to one of the greatest love stories the West ever produced. Tourists stop to read it, to take pictures, to imagine that terrible day when Natalie ran into the mountains and Harrison went after her. The story has been embellished over the years, the way all legends are. Some versions have Harrison fighting off wolves to save her. Others add a dramatic rescue where he had to carry her down a cliff face, but the heart of the story remains true. A woman was lost in the mountains when the storm hit, a cowboy tracked her prince through snow, and love bloomed in the aftermath. Their descendants still gather every year on the anniversary of that fateful storm, holding a family reunion that has become a Columbus tradition. They share stories about Harrison and Natalie, passing down the family history to the youngest generation. They talk about how their ancestors' love changed the trajectory of dozens of lives, creating a family legacy of strength, independence, and devotion. The current mayor of Columbus is Harrison's great-great-grandson, who has his ancestors' gray eyes and tracking abilities. He runs the town with fairness and integrity, qualities he credits to the stories he grew up hearing about his famous ancestors. His sister runs the Historical Society and has compiled an extensive archive of Harrison and Natalie's letters, photographs, and personal effects. Every Christmas, the family places flowers on Harrison and Natalie's graves, and someone always tells the story one more time. The details may vary depending on who is telling it, but the essential truth remains constant. This was a love that changed lives, that created something beautiful and lasting, that proved love could conquer any obstacle. The legacy Harrison and Natalie left behind was not just their children or their grandchildren or the many descendants who carry their blood. It was also the example they set, the proof they provided that true love exists, that it is worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth building a whole life around. They showed that social class does not matter when two hearts recognize each other, that wealth and status are meaningless compared to genuine connection. Young couples in Columbus still make pilgrimages to the spot where the line shack once stood, now marked by a small plaque. They stand in the shadow of the mountains and imagine what it must have been like for Harrison and Natalie, trapped together in that tiny shelter while the storm raged outside, falling in love despite every reason why they should not. They imagine the courage it took for both of them to defy expectations, to choose love over convention, to build a life together against all odds. The story resonates because it speaks to something universal: the human desire to find someone who sees us, truly sees us, and loves what they see, loves what. Harrison saw Natalie not as a wealthy businessman's daughter, but as a brave woman who survived a terrible ordeal. Natalie saw Harrison not as a simple tracker, but as a hero with a good heart and gentle hands. They saw each other's true selves and fell in love with those selves, uncomplicated by social expectations or material considerations. In a sense, the storm that nearly killed Natalie was the best thing that ever happened to both of them. It stripped away all the artifice, all the social niceties and pretense, and left them with nothing but their essential selves. In that crucible, they found something real and lasting. The storm forced them together, but love kept them together for the rest of their lives. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best outcomes, that tragedy and triumph are often intertwined, that love can be found in the most unexpected places. It is a testament to the power of human connection, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of true love. As the sun sets over Columbus, New Mexico, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, it is easy to imagine Harrison and Natalie sitting on their porch one more time, hands clasped, watching the day fade into night. They would be surrounded by the evidence of their love, the house they built, the land they tended, the family they created. They would be content, knowing that they had lived fully and loved deeply, that they had made the most of the second chance that storm gave them. The cowboy tracked the woman through the snow, found her when all seemed lost, and in saving her life found the love of his own life. Together they built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their mortal years. Together they proved that love, real love, is the greatest adventure of all. And that in the end is all that matters, is all that.